Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the zoo. The minions with me tonight are Adam.
Hello.
JenTMaxi.
Hello.
SkepTock.
Hi, everybody.
Prospero.
Hello.
And, of course, I'm the keeper for the night, Sanguine. How are all of you doing tonight?
I am well, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing fairly well. So, everyone
Old
else, how are you
bitter.
doing?
Old bitter, yeah.
Adam, Jen, how about the two of you?
Well, I had a little bit of a disappointment for me anyway, because I had a job interview and they're like, "Yeah, sorry, we hired somebody else." I'm like, "Why?" I'm like, "Oh, we just did." Oh, okay.
Okay.
So they hired before they went through their whole interview pool?
Yeah.
Yeah, yay.
Gotta love when that happens, right?
Yeah, it's like, fuck me, why are you doing it then?
Wait,
Yep.
wait, they hired you?
No, they hired someone else before they'd completed all their interviews that they had scheduled.
But I thought that there was like a massive need for people to work.
Yeah, there is labor shortage in most of the Western world right now.
So how did you get the shaft?
They found somebody else.
Yeah, that job did not have a labor shortage apparently.
Yeah.
Oh.
Over applied for, I guess.
Up here, that's kind of the thing. Like, that's pretty much been my response for the last, long time. But I'd say at best this year was better than last year in the sense that I've had more interviews at least. Last year, I couldn't I couldn't even get in the door. So at least this year, I've had at least 5 interviews this year. So, if I can squeeze in 1 or 2 more and then actually get a job out of one of them, and I'm still hopeful on this one anyway. Like, they gave me till Wednesday, and who knows, maybe the person they call back gets another job or something,
Hey, that's the, always look on the bright side of life.
Well, I have to. I got to get a job. If I don't keep the bright side of life, I'm not going to get a job. So,
Right.
And
You're not gonna have the bright lights on.
Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing, yeah. That was a nice turnover.
Sudden and savage, give someone whiplash, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, neck brace. I'm doing all right. It's Friday night, right?
Yep. And
Awesome.
there is a reason why I was somewhat speeding through the pleasantries, and that's because tonight is a special topic night. I do these shows every so often, and I decided this one would be on one hell of a topic, massive as all hell, which is Wars of Conquest and why the fuck they aren't really a thing anymore. Or at least currently. I will stress the currently, because I can see them returning to form before overly long, depending on how everything goes.
And whoever starts first is the one that's like questionable.
Yep, and in order to give the definition of War of Conquest as I see it, and the panel's completely free to disagree with me, and we can hash out those points. A War of Conquest to me is when a nation invades another nation and assumes direct control over it. What I mean by direct control is that nation that they just took over ceases to exist and just gets consumed by the invading nation.
Or they just assume control and leave the name alone. They don't always rename the place.
It seems like a vast majority of the time they end up consuming. But yes, there are exceptions.
Yeah, I'll give you the Norman Conquest.
Yes.
That is a pretty prime example.
That the names internal seem to be more just ways of denoting which plot of land they were talking about, whether they were talking about the Norman plots or the English plots. Though after they completely separated from the French crown, then yeah, they had an interesting situation where the Norman plots still owed fealty to the French crown to a little bit, but then the English plots were their own crown.
Right. That has nothing to do with the fact that it was still called England.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I mean. Is it? Now that was a conquest war, with a topic of inheritance.
Yep.
But that it was a conquest war.
But another example to give what I mean by the one nation ceases to exist and it's just taken over entirely would be an example that I've used 2 times tonight, I think, of Rome invading Gaul.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, there's still the area of land that in the Roman Empire was known as Galatia, if I remember correctly. Correct? That is the proper
It's
term.
Gaul.
It was just Gaul? Okay.
Yeah, it was just
I always confused Gaul and Galatia.
Galatia is something else.
Galatia is northern part of area of northern Spain.
Okay.
Spain.
Yeah, I was just about to ask. That's the Iberian Peninsula plot, right?
Yeah, part of the Gallic.
It's part of the Iberian Peninsula.
Galatia's Gallic. That's where it.
Yes.
It's not. It's not Gallic.
Yes.
It's different. So, it's Gaelic.
The Roman conquest of Gaul. Gaul remained part of the maps because it was a useful name for that plot of land, but there was no government.
Britannia and right.
Yeah, it just became nope. That's Rome, but this particular part of Rome is known as Gaul.
By the way, Galatia was the western part, or I'm sorry, the eastern part of Turkey, and some of the northern territories just north of there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Letters to the Galatians.
Well, hold on.
Yes.
Hold on.
I feel like pointing fingers up north from that map, a Tails direction, and anything past that was crazy land.
Well, no, it was actually a highly disputed territory
They were
when the Romans were around, and then it was interesting when the Normans got there.
Yeah.
But hold on. This I think this is a point that we can look at before we go on.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of how we are, how we're gonna prescribe the term of conquest, right? Like after the Romans marched up north and conquered most of Gaul, and France for the normies.
That's a good point, because I always had this envision of Ireland always being picked off with Vikings picking up girls on their chests and then carrying them off, and then it turns out that the girls kind of followed them along because they smelled
with
good.
Ireland.
Yeah, she jumped ahead several hundred years.
Okay. So going back to what we're talking.
Sorry.
So after Rome,
I'm guessing history wasn't your strong suit, Jen.
No, you were saying conquest, and I was like, other kinds of conquests. And then I had this vision of a guy carrying a lady home.
Oh, Jesus Christ, bodice rippers. Okay.
So, Adam, you were saying.
So, after Rome moved north and conquered, so to
Gaul
say,
and France.
Gaul, modern day France, yes. They had a different means of government over those people. And that is what I think we need to look into. What would you mean as conquest? Like those people were conquested over, I guess. Conquested. I don't think that's a word, but conquered over. Conquested. That's the Spanish conquest. But they were taken up. They still had to pledge allegiance to Rome. But they still governed over themselves within their own realm. And that seems to have been a lot of the cases with a lot of conquests in history where it be the Parthians or the Egyptians, where they just, hey, they would have just established a governor, and as long as the governor paid his dues to the ruling empire, that was what they were going to go with.
Well, devolved power, yeah,
Yes.
with the proviso that they provided defense usually.
Well, you would hope that they would.
Well, usually, one says usually because Rome collapsed from the exterior due to Rome being more interested in Rome than anywhere else, in part. So
some of that might have been disease too, though. Like, I don't know how much of that factored in, but
what, to the fall of Rome?
Yeah, I don't know. They keep bringing that up a lot.
The Justinian plague was before the fall.
No, that's not the primary reason.
Yeah.
Rome was.
Well, hold on. What was the main
black
question
holing themselves?
And what was the main point of the question? Is the expansion of the
So it sounded like the question that you're getting at was, are we including somewhat devolved power after conquest, or whether that becomes its own thing? Is that where you were going with that question, Adam?
Yes.
And Prospero was addressing that, giving an example, but I don't think he got all the way through. Did you, Prospero?
I don't even remember what I was saying.
So,
I mean, only because you look at it too. Because what stopped Alexander's conquest? The soldiers were tired of conquesting. That
happens.
And that is often
that happens. The human toll becomes a serious factor, and the personnel required to maintain a force that size.
And you also tend to notice expansion. Mm-hmm. Then you have a period of shoring up. So, for instance, when we're talking about Gaul, yes, Gaul very early on in the conquest was still very much Gallic. They still had a very similar culture, but then jump ahead 100 years into them being part of Rome, and it was very much losing that Gaul culture and was going more Roman.
Yes.
And you have in the ancient empires, and really in any empire, you had this expansion. The people that were newly expanded to had a period where they were still fairly distinct, and then over time they became more homogenous.
Hold on. Can I include real quick? Not only was Roman culture expanded throughout the Gallic and even the southern bit of the British Isles, but along with it, Greek culture, because the Romans loved the Greek culture. So I mean that also expanded with it, you know.
But they did a lot of stuff that always makes me question mark stuff. Like, you know, when I because the last couple of months and I know this is a little bit off topic, I've been watching a lot of stuff on Pompeii and Herculean. And like when those two cities like just disappeared off the map, I always kind of wondered, like, you would think that they would have been looking for them, because weren't they really prosperous as cities?
Not by comparison to the port of Naples.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were over the hills, so to speak. So actually, between the devastation, the loss of life, and the
it just seemed like it just...
Well, see, you got to remember, honestly, they're also dealing with pantheistic people to some extent. Things like that were out of their control. There was no point in looking for them because they were gone.
Well, no, I see it as the areas that these places are, there's not enough of... nobody is willing to go look at it.
Yeah.
And the places that they're at, They don't want people to look at it. Like, so that's kind of, that's for a lot of these areas, the architectural digging sites, you can't really go there anymore. Like it's a lot of it's restricted for some reason.
Well, that's
And
because they're crumbling.
It was
Like, a
also
lot of them are falling apart.
It was also very much a case of, they probably did send someone. The person went, yep, it's fucking gone, came back, said, it's gone. And
Well,
they
wasn't
decided the gods must have been pissed.
Wasn't it Pliny the Younger whose account of the
Yes.
eruption?
Okay,
Yeah.
so it was recorded then.
Oh,
Okay.
absolutely, it was.
He
recorded.
watched it from at sea. He was at sea.
Yeah, he was part of the
watched
people
it,
that
wrote it
took
down.
off, and I mean, his father died in it. The toxic cloud, but I mean, they knew.
Yeah.
They knew about it. They wrote about it. Pompeii disappeared.
Yep.
As did Herculaneum, but there wasn't anything to look for, so there was no need to look, and the focus would be on your port, on Naples.
Yeah, but they're finding that a whole bunch. They've already uncovered a whole bunch of stuff from there.
Oh no!
But what I'm saying,
I'm talking about in that time.
Yes.
At that time, that's what
Yeah,
Jen asked
That's
Adam.
basically what I mean. Because
Why
like,
didn't the Romans of the
Well,
age?
no, even when
look-
Napoleon went to Egypt, the Sphinx was just a head. So I mean, it's
Yes,
which
sweetie.
is-
What we're saying is contemporaneous to the ash cloud dissipating.
I just thought they were more important as cities. Like I for some reason, like the way they present the two cities, they make them seem like they were really rich.
yeah.
And I
Pompeii
just kind of
probably was
thought
just
like
a shithole.
No, they weren't. They didn't have the kind of wealth that a port would have.
Yeah.
Okay,
It was
okay.
probably just
They were on the backside of Vesuvius,
Okay.
landlocked, and so I mean the geography.
They were villages.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were. They were villages, and Pompeii kind of looks like it may have been a woohoo pleasure
I think
resort.
it's maybe
Naples
I'm
had a quarter of
conflating.
a million people.
I might
Yeah.
be conflating like current day with past day, because like current day, like I know the reason they're there is because they make money off of wine. Like they do a lot of money off of wine.
Why?
but-
Who's there?
The people who live in Pompeii, like I can't remember the city. Sorry, I'm bad with geography. I'm just going based off of that documentary I watched. But the people who are currently
On the outskirts of the ruins of Pompeii. Yeah. Yeah, they'd be in. They'd basically be in the suburban Naples, really, to some extent. Even though they're on the backside of the mountain. But no, at that time, vino culture would have been for local consumption only,
and also again at that time,
or to the troops.
Anytime that something like that would have happened, they would, if it wasn't observed directly, they would have sent someone there going, okay, it's located here. The person would have gone, oh shit, that's not there. Checked around to make sure that they weren't told slightly off, and then reported back, yeah, it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah. I mean,
and they would have chalked it up to the gods must have really been pissed.
Yeah. I mean, there wouldn't, as Skep said, there were 250,000 people at that time in Naples.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Naples is the port, and ports matter. The interior, which is agricultural villages,
if that's not a place to worry about for military excuses or reasons, then yeah, I guess that.
Not in the center, not in the south central section of Italy.
Yeah,
this is where geography becomes important, Jen.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking it, because I'm trying to.
This is the fucking hint. This is the fucking hinterlands. This isn't Rome. It isn't on top.
Could I say something about this?
Okay. Yep.
Pompeii had something that was unique about it. It had the hot baths. Because it was so close to the volcano, it was blessed with hot springs. the reason Pompeii was bigger than Herculaneum or and the other surrounding villages was it was kind of a resort village and actually had a middle class and an upper class, had a substantial upper class.
Like
Yeah.
Bath.
That said, sorry.
Just saying, like Bath, England.
Yeah, exactly. So what when those places were wiped out, first of all, people in Naples didn't get the word that had happened for a pretty long time.
Yeah.
It's not like, I'm sorry.
No, I'm agreeing with you. Sorry. Like I know back then, like travel and you know, word of mouth wasn't by pigeon; it was by boats and people traveling.
It would have been over foot. Yeah. Yeah, the Romans did value their baths because, I mean, Bath, England came into existence in Roman times.
Skep, do you have
That's
more
the
to say
parallel? If Bath had disappeared, they'd have noticed, but they wouldn't have dug it up either.
I'm out.
Skep, do you have more to say on that before we return back to the topic at hand?
I'm fine. That's it.
Okay.
Sorry, Skep. I wasn't meaning to interrupt you. I think there might be a lag on my end. So interrupt me next time, okay?
So going back to the topic of the stream, because we got off on a tangent about Pompeii and Herculaneum.
Sorry. I thought it was. I was trying to be relevant. I'm trying to create the map too in my head,
rather than wars of conquest and why they aren't currently a thing. So, as I said, when it comes to wars of conquest, the way that I view a war of conquest is
hold on. What about the war of conquest of the lava people and
taking direct control?
I'll throw you in.
Direct control over the area. You can have slightly devolved powers, so that was fairly common throughout most of human history, especially during like feudalism and times prior to feudalism, because you don't have the ability to give direct orders to every part of your kingdom or empire. So you have a local lord that then is the one who's in charge of making sure that your proclamations, your rules are carried out within that land. So you'll always have a certain element of devolved power, but in order for it to be a war of conquest, it has to end with the ultimate power residing in the conqueror. So if an area is, for instance, an area that would not be considered a war of conquest by any stretch of the imagination, because it does not have that aspect, at least by my definition, it could not be considered a war of conquest, is World War II, the Allies side. We invaded Germany. No one has any question that we invaded Germany.
Wait a minute. Okay, now let's... Wars of conquest are started usually by those who intend to conquer.
Yes, which...
Let's keep that straight, because we didn't invade Germany. Germany declared war on us.
Yes, I was saying that the Allies' war could never be considered a war of conquest.
No, because we didn't start either front.
We didn't start either front, and also at the end we didn't take, because you can have a war of conquest.
It could be considered a war of conquest
being retributive
because Germany invaded Poland.
Yes, which is something that I was going to mention as well, that the Axis side could be considered a war of conquest because they were expanding their lands and they were going to assume direct control. Then you had the Allies, which their war was not a war of conquest. And I would slightly argue with you, Prospero, that a war of conquest doesn't always have to be started by the person who at the end takes land, because you can have a war of conquest where two nations get into a war. One's trying to invade the other to take lands. Throughout the course of the war, they lose lands because the other nation not only beat them back out of their borders, Nation B beat Nation A out of their borders, but then continued the push back into Nation A's borders. that could still be considered a war of conquest after by the one that was originally on the defensive, because they expanded territory. So there is one war that could be considered, not necessarily definitely is, but could be considered a war of conquest since World War II. And that was I always confuse the two. Is it the 3-Day War or it's the 3-Day War, or there's one that was right after that as well. The one where Israel's borders doubled by 2. Or increased by 2.
From what they gave up when they were founded and got attacked? Or did they go back
were attacked and then they...
No, I'm talking about the day after they were founded. Their land, the land that was set aside for Israel was reduced rather significally, almost immediately. So
it was a reoccupation, effectively.
Well, hold on. Before,
yes and no.
Before you both go into that deliberation, I would say I would throw in as my toss in the hat in terms of war of conquest. I would look at the empire expansionists of 16 or 15, 16, 1700s, where you get the French and Indian Wars, or the expansion in Africa.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Things like that, where it was a conquest in terms of resources and territory. So we can at least go there, but if you both would like to continue your
the colonial age was rampant with wars of conquest, and throughout most of human history, wars of conquest were a almost constant thing, where one nation somewhere in the world would be invading another nation and taking direct control. But at a certain point, and like I said, the cutoff that is most easily argued for me, where wars of conquest kind of stopped being a thing, was World War II.
Yes.
Since World War II, there might be one example, but even that might not be perfect. But pretty much every other war...
It's much more highly problematic, and I would say that it's probably not the best example to be using.
Oh, I'm not intending to use it in that manner. I was saying that might be the only one that could potentially be argued.
You could say the Treaty of Alsace-Lorraine was a bit conquesty. The accords at the end of World War I.
Yeah, which is why I'm saying that the mark of the last true war of invasion that I can think of, the war of conquest rather, is World War II. Because Germany absolutely was trying to expand its borders. Japan that
started off that way. Yeah, but you've got the Korean War to consider.
And the Korean War, the two parties within the Korean War, the two primary parties, not the two backing parties, were North and South Korea, which both of them would have claimed that it was effectively a unification. Then you have the two backing parties.
It was a civil war with the intent of conquest on behalf of a master.
But okay, so then the American Civil War was a conquest war.
See, I would disagree that it was a conquest war on behalf of master, because I'm again relying on a sphere of influence does not conquest make.
Yeah, proxies are a thing, though.
Proxies are, but just because you're trying to bleed an enemy dry in a war does not mean that either of you are trying to take direct control over the region.
Yeah, I see your point.
So that's why I wouldn't say that. And I wouldn't count
Unless you
Korea,
consider economic hegemony conquest.
which it's a different sort of conquest. It isn't a
Military
war
conquest.
of
Yeah.
conquest.
Okay. Yeah.
So in order to be a war of conquest, it has to be military by nature.
Okay.
Whereas you can have cultural conquests, which those happen all the time.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. is constantly going through a approach for cultural conquest to an extent. So is China. So is England. Pretty much every nation that is producing a hell of a lot of media and trying to put it out to the rest of the world, yeah, they're technically trying to undergo a sort of cultural conquest. But when we're talking wars, last time a war of conquest happened, like I said, World War II is the easiest one.
No, cultural conquest.
Oh, cultural conquest is ongoing.
I would say also that there is a war of conquest underway.
Evolved wanted to point out Chinese taking Tibet.
This is weird. This is crazy to think that there's so much even just conquest. People trying to.
Well, most of it is. I mean, historically speaking, a lot of it had to do with the competition for resource.
Mm-hmm.
And securing resources and securing control over territory for those recesses, access to ports, turned resource into access to magic English language, but access to ports, transportation, goods, that kind of thing. It got a little bit more refined when trade became a thing, but it was almost all competition for resource. And even in that sense, the World War II fits that classic image.
And I have to
Lebensraum is a resource. And I mean, there were other things fueling it. But it was also access to a rollicking good port by comparison to Bremerhaven.
I have to correct one thing that I said because Evolved Potato did point out something that I should correct. He is right. The Chinese invasion of Tibet would be the most recent war of invasion.
Well,
that would definitely set up a physical.
I would say, it may be difficult to tell what Saddam's intent was in Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
But
that was definitely an intended war.
That was an intended war of conquest, and I would say that there is an attempt underway now to enact what we have now are skirmishes of conquest in the form of ISIS, ISIL, ISIS-K, ISIS rah today, whatever going on.
Yes.
And that is the purpose is conquest.
Yep.
It is to reestablish the caliphate. And the last time the caliphate got really, really busy, they knocked on the doors of Vienna. And that's kind of what they're recreating.
Yep.
Or attempting to recreate.
I would say that there are absolutely nations that are trying to revive wars of conquest, but I would still hold to they've fallen out of vogue, and thus far they have not been successful when they've been tried since the invasion of Tibet, with the correction that Evolved Potato gave. So since the invasion of Tibet, there haven't really been successful wars of invasion, and even the attempts at wars of invasion have been vanishingly rare. Why do you guys think that is?
I still have my theory.
Wait, what?
I'm not meaning to point fingers at you guys because I feel like an asshole doing it, but I feel like a lot of times the world uses you as the big brother system. And there's also this theory that I have that you tend to stop conquests And I think a lot of the world believes that you do that with the intentions of being the conquester. Not saying that you do, but I think that a lot of the world believes that. So fear of Big Brother might have put people thinking twice about it.
Oh, you're saying that? So the presence of a powerful hegemon.
Yes.
But hold on, Conquester, but as opposed
I'm
to
not
what?
saying that's always been the case, but I do believe that that's been underhandedly done. Because in reality, at no point, you guys could have invaded Canada at any point over the last 100 years. And I'm more than well aware of it. But
why would we bother?
Right?
To respond to what Adam asked of Conquest as opposed to what? Well, as opposed to having to deal with trade deals rather than just invading and having it be within your borders, rather than having to deal with the various treaties and negotiations and having to deal with crime in another nation. So another example of a nation that there's a bunch of reasons why a war of conquest would happen historically, but has not happened, is the US and Mexico. There's a lot of things that are causing headbutting between the US and Mexico. In many instances throughout human history, that would just lead to the US, which is the stronger power of the two, and a sufficiently stronger power that it would be able to roll through taking over Mexico. We haven't. Instead, we continue to deal with Mexico through other channels. So there's a bunch of...
Yeah, that kind of feeds toward the hegemon thing, an economic hegemon.
Yep.
Yeah, please.
Could I just make a couple of comments?
Absolutely.
I think you have to look at what the motivation is for wars of conquest in the past. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, when the world had not been fully explored, explorers would go abroad. Wars of conquest would happen because new land had been discovered. Mm-hmm. And the people who funded the expedition said, we want to keep that for our country. Mm-hmm. That sort of thing doesn't happen so much anymore. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, when one country pushes on another country, it's usually, most often, it is for purposes of economic utilization. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of ways now where it's possible to achieve the same goals that formerly were achieved by invasion and war. Okay. So where Napoleon might have said, I'm going to conquer all this stuff and, I'll get tribute from these people and, I'll have this big empire and I'll finally be tall. Okay. But where that happened in the early 19th century, now you have the ability for China to say, there's this big country that's militarily more powerful than us. How can we conquer them? Well, we'll eat them out from the inside. We'll take their manufacturing jobs away from them. We'll work harder. We don't have the technological leadership that they have, but we'll do the next generation, the next generation back, and we'll perfect that stuff. And what we can do is we can make them so dependent upon us that we own them. And that's effectively the long China plan. That's China's long plan. So you want to see a war of conquest. There's one being waged right now.
Yeah.
Wars don't really have to involve going over and killing a bunch of people, sailing over in wooden ships with sails on them and setting fire to the cities. You don't have to do it that way. You can wage a different kind of war of conquest now simply by putting yourself in an economically dominant position. That's basically what China has done.
Mm-hmm.
So I would argue that that's probably the latest war of conquest. And the other thing is, once you have a conquered people, what do you really want from them? You don't want the headaches of administration. You don't want to have to worry about their welfare. All you want to do is to economically exploit them. China's doing that rather handily for us right now. You know what the big headline is in China's economic newspapers? I actually had to read some and use Google Translate to translate these articles. You know what the big fear in their top economic think tanks are right now? That we're going to default on their debt, on the money that we owe them. That's $2.5 trillion, and they're shitting a brick over what we're doing to our currency. In a strange way, by destroying our currency, Joe Biden is, throwing a lame, weak counterpunch that hurts us more than it hurts them, but it does hurt them by weakening our currency by printing money.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk about wars of conquest and really talk about it realistically, talk about what it really means to conquer someone, what it really means to put yourself in a position to economically exploit another group of people, I think you have to discuss it in those terms. That's all I wanted to say.
China is effectively turning most of Africa into vassal states.
Yep.
They don't care about internal politics. They don't care about anything going on there. They want the rare earth minerals. They want the resources that Africa has, and they'll build them a shiny new port or put up some roads and fuck off out of town with all the goods.
So,
and they think they're getting a deal. They think that China's being benevolent to them, and as opposed to what they'd be able to do on the market.
They're doing that here too. They're doing that here too.
Well, it's the amusing thing is one can understand to a certain extent because of the lack of critical infrastructure in Africa why those nations would take that kind of devil's bargain, because they don't see it as a devil's bargain. What I do not understand is why the Anglosphere has done so with China.
Yep. And now 3 of you have touched on points that contribute to my belief as to why wars of conquest have fallen out of vogue. And really,
shooting wars, you mean?
Yes.
I have one answer for that.
Wars.
It's called Clown World.
And it's the Anglosphere. Because the Anglosphere has been the hegemon of the world for a considerable amount of time. The US as the current reigning champion of that, but the Anglosphere in general for a considerable amount of time. And the US and the rest of the Anglosphere decided a while ago, around the end of World War II, or right in the middle of World War II perhaps, that fuck that, you aren't allowed to just invade another nation and take control.
Yeah. I think you have a very romantic view of a lot of things.
See, I tried to post the clown emoji to explain that, but they didn't have it in brown face 3 times.
I take your point that as costly as World War II was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The European War had an element to it that was so horrifying that, as far as putting paid to European wars of conquest, it made it an imperative that the Allies state a position and state it loudly and clearly that we're not going to do this anymore, shitheads.
Yep.
As to Asia, it was a slightly different approach.
And I think that it still ends up with a fair portion of it being the fact that the U.S. and the rest of the Anglosphere is fairly well willing to
We
throw
also
its
had the
weight, or
bomb, dear.
has. Yes.
We also had the bomb, and that's one big fucking deterrent to bang bang shoot 'em up wars, is knowing that in an instant, a large number of people can just be disappeared. Thanos, if you will.
And it's not just you guys who have them too. It was always kind of taught in school.
Expanded out from us, yes.
Yeah, the idea that anyone setting one off could just end up destroying the whole fucking planet.
Oh yeah, mutually assured destruction was a thing, and it actually is a rather healthy motivator to stay away from certain bad behaviors.
As long as only rational agents have access.
Well, that was supposed to be the intent.
Yeah, a room full of people all pointing guns at each other does really.
Well, an armed society is a civil society.
Yeah,
and,
it's just the moment that a death cult gets their hands on it, that's when suddenly.
Well, that has
hits.
been the problem.
Yeah, I believe it's called a Mexican standoff. Oh shit.
Well, or a Pakistani standoff if you live in India. It's that was the intent, but that genie
out of the bottle.
Out of the bottle. The Rosenbergs gave it to our mortal enemy right away, but that's and then
with the blessings of the Democrats.
And all I can hear is China got the bomb. That's okay.
Yeah, but I could just imagine
Tom Lawyer moment happening in my head.
Yeah, I'm imagining the anime we'd get from China if you nuked them, though. You know.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry.
You
should be.
Like I said, I think that a large part of why wars of conquest have fallen out is because
it does make sense.
The Anglosphere came out so strongly in the fuck that, and has continued to be strongly in the fuck that. And I think that if we start to show weakness in that, wars of conquest will be a thing. And I think what's going on with China and Taiwan is pretty much just screaming that loud and clear, because when the US had a strong military, a strong executive branch, and was making it clear that no, you don't fucking touch Taiwan, China kind of backed off a little bit. They didn't ever give up any intent. They just went, okay, we'll take a step back.
Calm down the saber rattling to some extent. Yeah, I mean,
and then we have a weak executive, and we are doing things that will ultimately weaken our military. And what's the response?
We've had a series of them. Yeah. The response is they're going to test their limits, but they are primarily going for economic warfare. Like Skep said, it's the easiest for them to do.
I would argue that's...
And we've tripped right merrily down that little garden path, slinging flowers and smiling welcomes the whole way. The Australians have sold themselves. Canada has sold themselves. The United States is in the process of prostrating themselves. I was thinking of Joe and
but is it
prostate. It is irate prostration.
I would argue that a large part of the reason why China opted into that route, there we go, those are words that are said in the proper order, is because this almost explicit ban on wars of invasion.
Well, yes, and also
when that tool is taken off the table, then yes, people will start looking for other tools.
They also play a very, very long game. And remember, they have one of the tools. They could have, if they had wanted to eradicate the entire world and just been a little island of whatever, that wouldn't serve their purpose. They're not stupid. They've understood global trade since Marco Polo. So they're old hands at this game.
And
the Anglosphere is actually the newer hand on the block when it comes to that. So
there's always been trade. There's always been the attempts of economic control. There's always been the attempts of cultural control. All of these tools have always been on the table. And we've seen that in the past. So going back to ancient empires, there were times when Rome would trade with a rival empire. And it was normally at the times when either Rome was in the very slightly weaker position or they were about level footing. There were times when an ancient empire would try to culturally dominate another empire. This was normally when they were weaker militarily. So a good instance of this is Greece. Greece went whole hog on cultural domination of Rome. Because the chance of the Grecian military, after a certain point, being a rival to Rome was virtually nil.
Right. Yeah.
So they went for domination, which I was talking to.
Which the Romans bought into that.
Yep.
Hammer and tong. I was there. I remember.
That's always part of the cultural domination. You can't really culturally dominate an unreceptive target. Whereas when a nation, or at least the people within that nation, not necessarily the governing body of that nation, are receptive, cultural domination is ridiculously effective.
It is, and it's really easy, and it's frighteningly quick. Like,
yeah.
I've seen people say things up here that I've gone home and broken down in tears because I never thought I'd hear them say stuff like that.
And look, if you want a simple example of this, a simple example of cultural domination is look at the standard business attire throughout the world. Notice it all looks the same, effectively. Yeah. There's a couple of holdouts, but for the most part, business attire
fits all pants,
around the world is a decently cut suit. In Japan, it's a decently cut suit. In China, it's a decently cut suit. In Europe, decently cut suit.
Yeah, we got it.
Spot. And that was an expansion of culture.
Well, yeah, air travel and that the mixing, English becoming the lingua franca.
Well, I think you have to distinguish between wars of conquest that seek, the kind of domination that I was talking about with China over the U.S. accomplishes the same goals that a war of conquest would. Okay, the spreading of business suits around the world, that's interesting. It's interesting how culture spreads and so forth. But it doesn't have anything to do with putting one's country in a position to exploit the resources and people of another country in a vassal state type relationship. One of the things I think you might profitably discuss would be the notion that armies around the world, fighting forces around the world, with just a few exceptions, and the United States being a notable one, and I think maybe China and Israel also, and Britain, some of the really top ones. There's that top tier of militaries, but below that, there is kind of a rough parity of the kind of army you can expect to build with a certain level of funding. And for that reason, there aren't situations in which somebody in country A who wants to take over a country B or wants to economically exploit them can say, my army is so much better than country B's army, I can go in there, conquer them, intimidate them, and take the things that I want. That situation doesn't arise very often anymore. And
okay, you finish.
And the other thing is that the inability of countries that are widely geographically dispersed to project military force is expensive and risky. That's the whole thing behind C-cubed, command control communications. That's the heart and soul of projection of military power, and that's a technologically intensive, money intensive, risk intensive proposition that most countries, regardless of what they perceive as their needs, are in a position to undertake.
I would
argue you might discuss that.
I'd argue that the stalemate that you were describing in the first bit, where similarly sized and similarly economically powerful nations had similarly equipped militaries, is something that has been true throughout human history. And that the nations, the empires that became the conquerors were rare throughout history. It's just we know them because they have outsized influences.
So you can't think of you cannot think of situations where one military was clearly superior either in numbers, technology, or organization to another.
I'm not
that's
saying
what
that.
that's what I was saying.
What you're saying is that when you look at the vast majority of nations, that they're kind of on par with each other, right? And then there are exceptions. You acknowledge that there were exceptions. The U.S., China, a handful.
Yeah, the top tier is a different game.
Yep, and I would say that situation was much the same throughout most of human civilization, where the vast majority of nations at the time of Rome.
You don't think the Phoenicians were amazingly superior to the Sumerians?
I would say that they were one of the exceptions, not one of the rules. And I would say that Rome was, again, in that top tier. But I'm saying that
What about the Mongols with the whatever that dynasty was before the Song dynasty?
Hold on, wait.
Again, we're pointing out
Sumerians. That's
so
two completely these are two different.
Can we go somewhere current day?
And well, I'm just to finish out this part before we go current day, Jen. What I'm saying is not that all nations were equal. I'm saying that there was always that top tier, there was always a bottom tier, and then the middle, and the vast majority of the middle. The reason why it's not every nation was able to conquer all its surrounding nations, and why there were a shit ton of nations that would survive for hundreds of years side by side, was they had that parity that prevented either one from getting the leg up. But that doesn't stop the fact that we did have those top tier nations, the Romes, the Mongols, the Macedonians under Alexander, that were the top tier that you acknowledge are still around today. But those top tier would go around and they would be invading people after people after people.
That's how they
conquering lands.
Okay, hold on.
That's how they became top tier.
Exactly.
Hold on. At that point, you're describing like flash in the pan type things, like the Huns or even the Sea Peoples.
Yep.
You know, talking about the Phoenicians and the fucking Sumerians.
I still like that. Yeah, no worries.
I love the Sea Peoples. Oh, if I can bring the Sea Peoples up, it's a delight for me.
I just remember watching a program where they were throwing shade at this Egyptian leader for Sea
well,
People.
you know what? I think it was Ramesses III who was.
Yeah.
I could be.
He kept failing in his conquest, so he blamed it on the Sea People.
No. Egypt was the only Egypt was the only civilization that managed to survive the influx of the sea peoples. But it's sporadic um, invasions of peoples that kind of like disrupt the whole mega empires of the day. That's, I guess that's where we go. Like, okay, so what is conquest, and is it something that we can do now? Like, would we see a modern day sea peoples?
I argue that we could absolutely, if not for the aspect that I said, the Anglosphere effectively coming down on the no wars of conquest side of things, I think that we would absolutely see conquest. Because when you look at a lot of the governing aspects to conquest, you do have, of course, the stalemates that you brought up, SkepTock, where the vast majority of the world will be stalemated with the vast majority of the world. But then you have those top tiers, which tended to be the ones that conquered. And you had the bottom tier, which even the ones that were typically stalemated among each other, they would still be able to conquer the bottom tier as well. You would have those. But we have the current top tiers putting their thumb on the scale anytime that a war of conquest would happen currently. And causing it not to. That is, I think, a large part of it. If we look at the other things that influence conquest, it tends to be the ability to communicate from one side of an empire to the other quickly. The ability to transport goods from one side of the empire to the other quickly, and the ability to transport troops from one side of the empire to the other quickly. Those were three of the major governing factors when you're talking about empires.
Yeah, they needed a navy.
They needed a navy. They needed road systems. They needed communication networks, which varied from area to area. So, for instance, the Great Wall of China.
Yes.
Do you guys know how the towers on the Great Wall of China communicated?
Fire.
That's one of the methods. So, one of the methods, specifically at night,
they put cell towers on them because they were naturally higher than everything else. They got better cell coverage back then.
God damn it, Skep. One of the things during the night, yes, they would use fires. Do you know one of the methods that they use during the day? There's a very specific thing that is really goddamn clever that not many people seem to know. I'll give you a hint. It involves water. Anyone know?
Ice sculpting.
No. So there's...
I'm pretty sure that's right.
If you piss in an arc to the west, that means that the invaders are coming from the north. If you piss in the arc to the north, it just follows for a 15 degrees around that.
So in certain sections of the wall, this wasn't in every section of the wall, they had effectively tubes running from one tower to the next tower that you could add water to, causing the water level in the tube at the other tower to rise, or you could remove water from, causing it to decrease. And there were signals that they would send using the raising and lowering of the water levels between these two towers. So you could send the signal faster than you would be able to by sending a runner down the wall, faster than you'd be able to by sending a bird or anything like that. And because it was during the midday, just lighting a fire might not be the most effective route, or your section of the wall could be behind a obstruction of some sort. So even if you lit a fire, it would be difficult for them to see. You could raise and lower the water level, and that would send the signal down the wall in an obscenely short period of time. So you would have all these different methods. You would have birds, you'd have roads, you'd have runners, you'd have the fires and the signals. You'd have
you had complex communication.
Exactly.
They actually used fire during the day. They used wolf dung.
To increase smoke?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of its thick, dark smoke.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were, like I said, it wasn't in every section that they had this
What's
one.
the worst job in the army?
The wolf dung lighter.
No, the gatherer.
Ah, okay. But yeah.
Get low on the wolf dung.
Shit.
So you had these complex communication methods, and then you would also use the roads for transporting goods from one side of the empire to the other. In Rome, you had the aqueducts to transport water from far reaches.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always one of the major governing factors on the size and stability of an empire was the efficiency of its transport of goods, transport of communication, and transport of troops.
Efficiency and safety.
Yep. If you look at modern day, all three of those factors, we blow the ever-living shit out of any other point in history.
Yeah, okay, but
that's kind of why I was pointing at the future, because like if you really want to talk about a comparison in empires, like I'm gonna pick the shit on my own country, because if you really want to compare the two of us in terms of infrastructure, there's no reason why we would have a giant military just based off of our differences in population. But based off the amount of money that we are worth as a nation, as Canada is, there's no reason why our military couldn't be bigger than it is.
Mm-hmm.
At best, we do run a little bit different. Like Trudeau doesn't have power over our military. It's not set up that way. Like they're more based off of us, or at least they're supposed to be. When it comes to war, at least, like that's something that we would have say in.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with the Queen, like that all factors in.
England goes to war, Canada goes to war, whether you say yes or not.
That's basically it. We have very strong allegiances too. Like it's kind of naturally, it's kind of worked into the system. Like it's kind of unquestionable for a lot of us. Like I still remember as a 6-year-old still hailing the Queen, and that was the last time I did it, but I still remember doing it. But at the same time, though, when I really think about it, when it's really kind of spelt out, there was never a lot of encouragement to join the military up here, not in any comparison to you guys. Like, comparing TV shows or just like going down to the US, there's no comparison.
There is no be all you can be, eh?
No, not at all. There is a lot of support for our military. Like we do a lot when we talk poppies, we're very serious about it.
Yes.
And that includes the current day military. Like that respect is very much there, but they're not saying respect, but please join us. They're just saying, please respect us because we've done a lot for everybody. And that makes a huge...
It's more of a cultural norm than a...
Yes. And on the other hand, we kind of turned our military into more of a peacekeeping unit than necessarily a military, because, if we did build up a military...
The joint defense agreements that are going on have made it unnecessary for you to keep.
It doesn't make sense when you guys are right there. Because, like, if we really did build up a military, you guys would be eyeballing us like, what the fuck? And who are we going to invade? Russia? Because they would laugh at us too, to be honest.
Yeah, the U.S. has become the defensive force for a fuck ton of nations around the world.
Well, for the Western Hemisphere.
And not just the Western Hemisphere. Like I said,
yeah, I know.
Kuwait and Japan.
Well, yeah, but in the Western Hemisphere, it is the kind of standing army for the Western Hemisphere.
Yep.
And then in conjunction with NATO and in conjunction with ANZAC and
Orcus.
Yeah, all the partnerships that we're engaged in, where we're toting most of the responsibility. I mean, the British still field a reputable military, but
especially their navy.
No other European nation does. To
Mhm.
speak of, France is, I'd say, next. Quite decidedly next as far as capabilities. Yeah. Not gonna get into that European Union army, although that is going to be amusing as shit.
Yep. Especially as they try to explain why
Japan
they're
was
able to field.
restricted from having a outward-looking military per se. And they were happy to accept the restriction. It saved them buttloads of money.
Mm-hmm.
Korea has a standing army of some repute.
North Korea has 1 million soldiers.
Oh yeah.
In varying stages of readiness.
in varying stages of leprosy.
Starvation.
Okay, but the the ROC at least has representative force. But
they've actually got South Korea has like 500,000 active duty guys.
Yeah.
The funny thing about South Korea is it has like 3 million reserves, and those reserves drill. They stay current. They're good to go.
Yeah, they
take NOCO really seriously.
Yeah, they actually they have a more defined military culture. Much more because of immediate threat. Immediate threat. Japan probably should develop more than they have.
And they're finally being allowed.
That there really wasn't a need, and there really wasn't any desire on their part. It has taken this long for the generational changes
and the newest administration
to come into play. Well, they started making noises during the Obama administration, I think.
Yep.
Well, that's not a surprise either. But
imagine my shock.
Yeah, they made noises during Obama. They quieted down a little bit, and now they're making a hell of a lot of. We need to make more.
Yeah, and I think they do.
We need more yesterday. God damn it.
Well, I think they do merely to have our back in the event something were to go down that involved them.
You heard the threat from China to Japan over Japan saying that if anything happened to Taiwan, they would be backing Taiwan to the fullest extent of their ability.
The fullest extent of our ability, you mean? Yeah.
It was Japan saying that they would do it. And the response from China was that if Japan got involved, China would nuke them and continue to nuke them until they surrendered or the island was reduced to glass.
Right. Because the Chinese love to say reasonable things like that.
Yep. So I can definitely understand
when they rattle their
no, we fucking need shit now.
Yeah, when they rattle their sabers, they really go for some hyperbole. It's kind of precious.
The thing that China needs, they don't need more territory. China has plenty of territory. If you look at China, there are swathes of China that are just practically unpopulated at all. What they need is economic production.
Yeah.
So grinding Japan down to glass or doing the same to Taiwan is unappealing. What they want to do, and Prospero has pointed this out on another stream, I guess was my show, or was my show, where you said that they wanted to basically do a Hong Kong on Taiwan, and I agree with that. I think that's exactly what they want to do. They want to capture the money factory that Taiwan is intact, and they just want a piece of that money and celebrate reunification. There are some legitimate cultural vibes that exist for the reunification of China, but in point of fact, most of the immediate motivation is getting China out of a credit crunch that could get a lot worse if the U.S. says, "Hey, that 2.5 trillion we owe you, we're not going to pay it to you. Sorry."
Mm-hmm. Especially with China going through its current route of culling its economically effective population.
Well, and they've also fucked themselves in that whole credit scheme that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Oh my God! Yes.
Yeah, they're hurting. They are hurting.
They are standing up on matchsticks, right?
It's one of the reasons that they're being hyperbolic.
Well, it's one of the reasons they really want Taiwan, because that's just a big old bucket of cash.
Yeah, and they're not going to get any resistance from the present administration, I'm afraid.
No, he's a fully owned subsidiary of the Chinese Communist Party, and that's not hyperbole. I mean, he literally is being paid by them.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and his
or has been,
and his neighbor to the north is as well, and so it's sorry, Taiwan,
which is why I've said that thus
kind of
far,
like sorry, Hong Kong. Sorry,
yeah,
we're getting really good at just kind of waving our hands and going sorry.
Well, the thing about Taiwan that's different from Hong Kong, which I also pointed out the other night, is that Hong Kong was slated to be returned. It was a 99-year lease, done and done. And but with respect to the Taiwan, that's a situation where you have two belligerents. You have a very different picture of things. Taiwan believes that they are the legitimate government of China. And they should go and take over the mainland and run democracy over there. And they think that's the only legitimate way to think about it. Now, I realize there is one whole political party, or actually two political parties over there. One's a very minor party, but it's noisy enough to cause problems. Who believe that no, there's yet a third way, but that third way is China gets to sink its hooks into Taiwan, so that there's no real difference between. It'll be an economic reunification where China ends up owning Taiwan. And it's once again, so what you were talking about, Prospero, China playing the long game.
Yeah, I think as far as the resource thing, like with Hong Kong, it was probably Harry who may have brought that up.
You might be right. I'm old. I can't remember.
No, that's okay, because I am not.
Anyway,
just sorry, Taiwan.
Yeah.
Either way, they're hosed.
I feel a little bit worse for Hong Kong because of those circumstances. Like, because culturally speaking, I do feel like my reading and my interactions with people online for the short period that I did, they do seem very different.
Yeah, the British the British honored an agreement that they made prior to Mao. Prior to, which is it's one of those agreements that there is a side of me that, if it were the best of all possible worlds, they would have reneged on the moment.
No. The way that they should have done it, rather than reneging on it.
Over, say it was void because it was not the government that they made the agreement with.
See, I disagree with that as
destroyed.
well. The way that they should have done it in order to still fulfill their agreement, but in a more accurate way, is okay. We give back Hong Kong, Taiwan. It's all yours.
Yeah. I mean, technically speaking, the inheritors of Chiang Kai-shek.
Their government was started by him.
Yeah, I know. But you're also tied into that whole empire that died, and it's but it would have been pretty funny if they had said, no, we're keeping the agreement, we're just changing the location. That would have been wildly provoking to China.
It's not even changing the location. It's we're keeping the agreement with the nationalists as
No,
we
no, I
signed
understand.
it.
It was an impossible agreement to enforce that way because the Chinese merely would have invaded.
Which would have forced their hand at a time when
Yeah, I don't know. It would have.
we had
Oh dear God!
leadership
I
that
mean,
is
yeah.
not as spineless.
Considering when it was, there was a great deal of war weariness.
Oh, there is
A great deal of war weariness that led to the creation of the Iron Curtain, Sanguine. So I wouldn't be too sure that the whole thing wouldn't have gone tits up. Also,
potentially.
you didn't have a British government that would play that kind of game.
But yeah, it is. So, does anyone else have a idea behind why the wars of conquest, the actual military wars of conquest, fell out of vogue?
I think basically it's mutually assured destruction.
Mm-hmm.
Has a great deal to do with it, as well as the shifting focus to economic power being the primal power. If you can't beat them with guns, you will win them with les blue jeans.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look at the Russians were running around wearing Levi's. The government didn't want people to wear Levi's in Russia. They were black market selling Levi's all over Russia.
And
so
that's where I was starting to go with the suits example.
Yeah. Except this one was much more subversive in that it was very, very much an irritant to the Politburo. The amount of Western culture that was leaking in behind the Iron Curtain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the old Khrushchev doctrine.
Yeah, and I mean, it was the things like Radio Free Europe and that kind of stuff. A very long game was played, and it was a culture that was part of the cultural war of the Cold War. Cultural and goods. Goods. If you can feed a black market and a desire for all those happy things that people in the free West can get their hands on, all the better. And it was done with the intent of bringing an evil empire to their knees, not with the intent of enslaving their people.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not a conquest in that regard. It was a long persuasion.
An attempt at liberation.
The bringing them to their knees through proxy was the actual economic warfare that went on, the proxy wars, and
the old
Afghanistan broke Russia.
Yep, and like I said, when you look at
and it broke us too.
When you look at the historic reasons why decisions were taken versus should we engage in trade, should we try to conquer them, should we try to influence them culturally, all those different options, because all of the options have been on the table throughout all of history when it comes to that.
Yeah.
All the same choices that we're making now. It came down to, are you physically able to take more land? That was the three transport.
And do you have do you have a need for the land? You don't have a need for the land. We reached a point where the land issue and the resource issue wasn't the driving issue. The driving issue became economic power that became the driver. You see what I'm saying? That in the course of the 20th century, the sphere of influence moves away from resources for the people that were able to play at the level of getting engaged in wars of conquer. It shifts on its axis during World War II, quite literally. from conquering for both subjugation and economics, and in both cases, subjugation probably more than economics and driving them to economics. And it's because the United States came out of the end of World War II and, barring a brief lapse right after the end of the war, took off as the economic powerhouse on the globe. We just ripped into full-throated happy days are here again. The economic growth that took place in this country and our ability to project power through that, through the 50s and 60s, was just, it's almost indescribable.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's a whole new world.
But you know, it's stuff right now that's got me spooked. Like I never would have thought I'd hear my mom agreeing to things like, sorry, I'm not meaning to interject COVID into this, but yeah, she was agreeing with the passport shit and the mandate shit and like repeating the fuck your freedom shit, and
Well, fear is a very powerful motivator.
like, yeah. Like her mother fled Austria after World War II because the Russians had invaded their town.
Austria?
Yeah, she's from Austria.
Okay.
You know, after World War II, Russia did take over quite a few towns when they were kicking out the Nazis.
Oh yeah.
And some of the shit that it's war. A lot of the stuff that they did, like, she told me stories, you know, and my grandfather was in one of their special camps. And on my dad's side of the family, he lost his granduncle to flying planes, you know. And I'm sitting here, like, she's saying stuff like that in front of me. And I'm like, I understand that you're scared. But, like...
Yeah, well, economics plays a factor in that, too. People want to maintain the way of life they have, and they're afraid of ever placing that at risk. And we become very accustomed to very safe and comfortable lives very, very quickly.
That's really true.
We've also up here really gotten used to thinking that if we give a little, they'll give some back. And
yeah,
that always works.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like we've done that so many times that I'm just like, you guys have to stop, because they're not stopping.
It's not like government's known for never giving up anything that it's been given.
It's portrayed itself, though, by always being there with a bag of cash. People can be bought very, very easily. Their comfort is bought.
Mm-hmm.
And they're made men and they don't know it. The government, government has turned your mom into a made man, Jen.
Yeah.
It's the old school Reagan line of nothing should scare you more than the phrase, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah, it should, if you value your independence and your liberty and your self-determination. But people don't see it that way. They see a big old wheelbarrow full of cash and a smiling guy glad handing them all them Benjamins. And they will take it and they will sell their soul for it because they don't consider their soul worth that much compared to a new pair of Nikes. It's just, first you sell, Madison Avenue made a killing doing this, training us to consumerism. And we were well trained, just like Facebook has trained us to algorithms and trained us to little happy serotonin hits when we get a like on something that we post. It is egregious and deliberate psychological manipulation of people's responses, and it's been carried out brilliantly. All of us are in that trap in some way or another, no matter how independent we feel. We're in that trap because of our circumstances, either because of gender or age or whatever. Our ability to go out and pioneer anew somewhere is limited.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, I am not a fit candidate for, a Mars expedition or whatever. Some young men are, some young women are, but it's that ship sailed.
Yeah.
And I am in the unenviable position of
we're not all William Shatner. We can't.
I'm a made woman in some ways. In that way, I'm a made man. In some ways, I am dependent. Unfortunately, on certain things staying stable.
I would absolutely
in order to survive. And it's not a pleasant position to be in.
Yeah.
It's not a pleasant position to be in. And it's deeply disappointing when your principles and your ideals come crashing into the reality of what is. And it is alarming the number of people who will, for very, very little in return, cashier all their independence. Just right out. Here I go. I'm gone. I'm done. I'm your guy.
You're stupid and scared. Ignorant and scared. Not stupid, but ignorant and scared.
Ignorant and scared primarily. A very good job has been done over the last 18 months in fucking terrifying the public.
It really has. Like, she won't even talk to my aunt. I'll have to do the talking between the two of them because, like, I can understand her fear, like I do, but at the same time, though, I'm like, you've done everything that they've told you to do to protect yourself. So at this point, you can say fuck you to everybody else, right?
Yeah, it's just as they have said, hard times make strong men. Strong men make good times. Good times make soft men.
Yep.
And it's kind of the cyclic nature of humankind on the planet. We've seen it over and over again. Different degrees of comfort and safety play in each one of the scenario, whatever, as you move through time. But they all do. And Sanguine has very wisely pointed out that evil is done by slowly co-opting good men. It's not done by just vast herds of evil people. Slowly but surely, people will compromise their principles.
Still a simplistic view of the situation. I would say, in terms of the Simple Times debacle, there's still troves of strong men.
There are
struggling to hold up what's left of the civilization.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I'm not saying there aren't. I'm just saying it is remarkably easy to shift the tide from that being 90% of the people to being 50% of the people.
I'm not worried about the percentage. I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna feed myself.
Many boats need to be sunk. I don't know how you're gonna do that in Chicago. It's like the last time I talked to you about Chicago.
I apparently the at midnight the Chicago union, I guess police union, is supposed to there's supposed to be like a mandate or something going on.
Oh.
Yeah,
wait, say again.
I guess in Chicago, they're supposed to do like a vaccine mandate, and then the Chicago Police Union is saying don't do it or something like that. There's supposed to be a strike or something like that. I don't know.
So there might be another something like a walkout or something.
Yeah, like kind of like the Southwest stuff that's going on.
Yeah,
Well, that's entirely what Chicago needs.
Yeah, exactly.
The pilot strike that's currently going on. That it's the weather. Well, why did every other plane take off? I don't know.
So Adam, maybe you should work on a bomb shelter. Kind of like that one movie where like everyone kind of goes nuts and kills everybody. You need a bomb shelter for like a couple weeks. Like a track route between your jobs, so you don't lose your job. I'm not suggesting that, but like duck and cover and. Sorry.
Listen to the turtle from the old cartoon.
Yeah.
Chicago's large enough; it should have a fallout shelter or two floating around.
Bridges, I don't know.
That reminds me. Have you guys? So this is off topic before we go back onto topic, but that just made me remember.
Good luck there.
The sheer number of times that I've lived in a place. I don't know why I've lived in places that keep on having fallout shelters, but how many places have you guys lived that you know where the fallout shelter for your area is?
I was in Florida during the Cuban Missile Crisis. They didn't even bother with that fiction.
I was in Belgium during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we knew exactly where the fallout shelter was.
Nice.
The Military Aid and Assistance Group in downtown Brussels. The second morning we actually went over there and spent the morning there instead of going to school.
Yeah, they didn't even bother with us, Skep. It was like,
well, Europe was about to get nailed.
I know, and
that's where the conflict would have really.
To be honest,
it would have been the worst, most definitely.
To be honest, with where I was at the time, well, not where I was, but my town at the time, and the size and the population, most people would have just left the town because they would have been going out into the middle of nowhere.
They wouldn't have been probably impacted all that severely initially. You're kind of the hinterlands in that regard.
They would have just gone out into
Europe. Europe would have just gone. Basically.
And to be honest, at best, they probably would have hit up the mountains because mining community up here is actually a big thing. Like, when you go out into the mountains, it's kind of like Afghanistan. You're going to get lost. I mean, nowadays you guys could do it.
If they'd bothered with Canada as a target, they would have hit the east.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
in Vancouver.
That's what I mean. Like, we would have been like, oh, well, sorry, huh?
I've lived in at least 3 locations that I know where the fallout shelter in them were.
Yeah, I've always lived so near a major city with either military installations in it that were prime targets or within blast range of it. Now, how did this come up anyway?
Oh, it was just a mention of nukes a bit ago. Made me go, wait.
Well, no, like I had not. Sorry, I had to picture like the time zone and what because like current day would have been different. Like I honestly don't know what I would have done as a child if something like that were to happen because it's never come up. That was always more of something that my parents would talk about. They're thinking.
Actually, it was the mention of Fallout was what made me go, Fallout shelters. I know where 3 Fallout shelters where I lived were. And one of them is not far from where I am right now. One of them was in the town that I was born in because it was a steel town and it was deemed a big enough target that they decided, we're going to make Fallout shelters around the town. which was interesting because now it's a town that no one would think of. But going back to the topic, does anyone else have anything that they want to add in? We've talked about what each of us thinks is the likely reason for wars of conquest falling out of fashion. We've talked about what has taken over, the other options that were always available but are now made more attractive. It sounds like we have a slight disagreement as to whether they're more attractive in and of themselves or whether they're more attractive because the wars of conquest were taken off the table. And we've talked about the factors that influence the ability to maintain cohesion with an empire, the relationship of your empire to the surrounding empires in terms of your military might. If you have a massive power differential, it increases the chance of wars of conquest. If you have a almost negligible, then that massively decreases. And then the relation between the various nations, if you're on good terms, decreases. If they're prats, increases. And the number of problems that being near that nation also increases and decreases, depending on if it's relatively few problems, decreases. If it's a fuck ton of problems, then you're more likely to go, you know what, it would just be easier taking you over.
No, damn it.
May you all damn it, sure.
Shit. See, damn it.
See, you just all damned it again. Yeah, you're perfectly able to.
I'm also saying stupid shit in the chat to Costin. So.
Sorry, I'm just giving you shit at it. Go ahead.
See, and that kind of doubles over, you know, the whatever, you know. Damn it.
Sorry, I was trying to show support to Costin because he was like, after Blood would be blown up, I would have poked him to see if he was all right.
Will a quick reminder of what was said right before you were going to jump in help jog the memory, Adam?
Yeah, no. What?
It was the breakdown of the different influences on whether wars of conquest were more or less likely in the past was what was being said right before you went to jump in. So the internal cohesion, power differential between you and surrounding nations, the relationship between you and surrounding nations, the problems caused by the surrounding nations.
Yeah, no, I think my interjection was more in place of showtime, right? like how we would structure a show and the topics there. And I think yes, I think this is something that we should have a discussion.
Well, we're currently live on air having the discussion.
Yes, we are live. Yes.
I mean, I like to think I have my theories on why we don't have conquests anymore. And I know I keep pointing my fingers at you guys, but that big brother thing is kind of a thing. Like the whole idea of I'm not saying this is an actual thing. Like, I don't think it's a real excuse, but like I wouldn't doubt that there are some countries in this world who probably do use you as an excuse for, hey, if you invade me, we're going to go to the US and be like, hey, we'll give you resources or whatever if you help us.
Oh, there absolutely are, considering the fact that the most recent wars of invasion that have failed have pretty much all failed because the Anglosphere came in, put their thumb on one side of the scale. Iraq went to invade Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
Kuwait did not get taken over by Iraq. The reason why is because the US and the Anglosphere and several other European allies stepped in, put their thumb on the scale, and pushed the Iraqis back out of Kuwait. Kuwait functionally does not have a military because the Anglosphere and the West functions as its military. In previous times in history, this would result in the nation that has taken charge of the defense of Kuwait would have taken resources, taken payment, taken something along those lines. Anyone know how much the U.S. pays Kuwait per unit of oil? Do they pay nothing, or are they just given it?
Market
Do they
price. Pay market
exactly?
price.
They pay market price on the barrels of oil that we get from Kuwait, which would have been unheard of at earlier points in history.
Yeah, we'd have just stayed, and it would have been our oil now.
Yep, we would have either just stayed and it would have been our oil, or we would have gone, okay, here's the deal. We'll help defend you, but you're going to give us a tribute of X number of barrels of oil every year.
Yeah, well, some say we might be stupid, that we don't hammer out better trade deals with some of these places that we agreed to defend. But because we're very conscious of not wanting to be called imperialist pigs. And
I also had this secret belief that that a lot of Americans do kind of want to see the rest of the world kind of bounce up on their own too.
Well, we've tried to pull back several times.
Yeah, it would kind of be nice, because I'd really prefer not to have to keep cutting them checks.
You know, like it would be nice to see other places do well too. It's sometimes that's the other reason.
Yeah, it is. It isn't all beneficence, but it's some.
By the way, we pay Kuwait $80.64 per barrel of oil. That's the current price right now.
Yep. I was just getting at, are we paying market above, below, or
that is almost exactly on the market.
Yep. Yeah, we pay market value for the oil.
Yeah, no, we're not extorting oil from them for defense.
Yep. And when it comes to, we have this cycle, it seems, in the US of we get really involved in world politics and we try to kind of pull back when people start saying, well, look at America just becoming the world police again. So we kind of have this, okay, fine, you want to deal with this shit yourself? Deal with it, and we'll step back for a little bit.
There are times in which I feel that we pay far too much attention to what other people think of us, because it appears, particularly when it comes to Europe, that no matter what we do, whether we are isolationist, whether we're Team America World Police, no matter what we do, they're going to fucking hate us.
Yep, and the last major time that we kind of pulled back going, okay, fine, fuck it. You say that we're getting involved too much? It's on you. If it's in your backyard, you guys deal with it. Was the Bosnian Incident?
Yeah.
Where Bosnia and Herzegovina, right? I'm remembering.
Are you talking about the collapse of Yugoslavia?
Yes, and then the
civil
sectarian
war,
violence,
the sectarian civil war, and the multiple reformation of little nation states out of Yugoslavia. Yeah.
Yep. Where we pulled back and we went, okay, Europe, it's right in your backyard, and shit started going sideways. And we're going, Europe, it's like, just drive a truck over the border. You can see it. It's right there. Just go. Send someone. Stop this shit. It's right there. And Europe did nothing. And we kept doing that, and shit kept on getting worse and worse and worse until we decided, okay, you know what? Fuck it. We tried to step back. You didn't do shit. Now, okay, we're here.
Yeah, it's also where our Pentagon guys began showing that they some of them valued NATO more than they valued the U.S. military.
Yep, which was and still is a massive fucking issue. But it was, like I said, the U.S. government was getting chastised for being too involved, being.
What was the name of that dickhead Skep? General Wesley.
Wesley Clark.
Thank you. That fucking effete twat. Wasn't he the one in charge of?
He's a piece of human garbage.
The NATO forces.
Yes.
And yes, he is just absolute.
He's gone off the deep end in retirement. Is he dead yet?
Yeah, he's a bit of a John Brennan.
But yeah,
if you get my drift.
But it's been
he is actually.
It's been absolutely super noticeable. Like even from somebody who's not an American, like outsider, it's been a noticeable thing. Like the shade that's been thrown at you guys, even for the past to the current day, as though you're still doing that kind of shit. Mm-hmm. And it's portrayed very underhandedly in a way that's easy to misinform people.
It's 8th grade girls' bathroom jealousy.
Yes.
I am sorry. I am very, very sorry that we formed a nation on a continent full of natural resources, and we told our irritable father in Great Britain to go shove it up his ass, and that you guys up north went, oh no, shove it in harder, daddy. And so you stayed favored children of the crown, and we shot our middle finger up in the air, and then yay, and loads of people came here from other countries, and we ended up being the great big bad United States with all the economic engine that came with it.
And the thing that's infuriating
Gosh, I'm sorry.
You're fine.
We had this, we got involved, we get criticized for getting involved. We stay out, we get criticized for staying out. When we do get involved, we get criticized that we didn't get involved early enough. And that happened all throughout the Bosnian Herzegovinian incident.
Yeah.
Where
Merry world policing on behalf of NATO, because we are NATO.
And the other
5 French and some English and 3 Dutch are NATO. Well, I'm sorry, Canada, you're really good at the peacekeeping thing. So because UN peacekeepers are kind of your bag.
It worked with you guys. That's how it is. Like it worked with you guys because you kind of need to have a little bit of both. Like sometimes you need someone to just be a mitigator. But I'm not saying this stuff.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Jen. Nothing intent.
No, I know.
Ill toward you. No. But I give no fucks what Ottawa thinks.
I don't either.
None. And the idea that we would give any amuses the shit out of me.
I told this
as a
joke
trading
a long time
partner.
Ago.
Absolutely, I think Canada and the U.S. should march along as best buddies. That's what the whole North American deal is.
I told this joke back when Biden got elected that my prime minister has been sitting in his office waiting for the phone call so he could just talk to him like a little sad puppy. Because I think that's exactly what he did before he decided to blow $500 million on an election just so that Quebec could tell him to go fuck himself.
Oh, the Democrats Democrats are terribly fond of Canada. It reminds them of them.
Yeah.
It's whatever.
It's just, I've talked to people around the world, and what they say about the U.S. is not what's portrayed in the media. It's not what's portrayed in the movies. It's not what's portrayed in the TV shows. And that's really what got me so confused, because you talk to these people where your military has been, and you hear both stories. You hear sometimes there's the odd complaint, but a lot of times you hear about stories where you did a lot of good things, and they never seem to talk about that. It was always seems to be focused on the bad shit.
Yeah, Dear Europe, about that Marshall Plan.
And it's
I have a bill in my back pocket if you'd like to settle up.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be happy not to send another dime to you.
And it's no goddamn surprise that every time that we have that, okay, we're going to pull back. We're going to stop being the world police because everyone's pissed off that we're world police. Horrendous shit happens.
You know, they get mad at us for not being there to prevent it.
Yeah, because the Rwandan genocide, we
didn't have, we never, we're very picky about what world policing we get involved in.
Well, that was during one of the periods where we were going, okay, fine, you want us to stop, we'll take it back.
Yeah, we went.
You guys fucking handle this shit.
Nah, we weren't going to sanguine. That if people had wanted to do something about the Rwandan genocide, something would have been done about the Rwandan genocide.
I still say it sure shit wasn't going to happen during one of the points where we were pulling back.
We weren't that damaged by bad publicity in Bosnia. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was just the typical bullshit that we've heard for decades.
Yeah, it was them bitching and moaning. I'm saying that
it really was. I mean, hon, you're kind of young, okay? I mean, I remember when we got involved in the whole Bosnian thing and the whole peacekeeping thing. And other than one of our soldiers being reprimanded for not wanting to wear the badge of another military force above his U.S. emblem, he didn't want to be labeled as anything under a U.S. soldier, and he faced discipline for it. That was about the most controversial thing that occurred. It was a shit show of a civil war. We were there because Europe was wringing their fucking hands.
Rescuing that pilot was pretty ballsy.
That was pretty cool. I mean, we did some neat stuff.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm not going to call it a glorified weekend warrior event. There were some bigger things that went on, but it was not exactly a major exertion on our part.
Oh, I wasn't saying that it was.
And as far as the publicity goes, if Bill Clinton had wanted to get involved in Rwanda, he'd have gotten involved in Rwanda. Just saying.
Yeah, more like than not. But I'm saying that this cycle of pull back, step forward, pull back, step forward, it sure as shit wasn't going to happen during one of the pullbacks. And it was during one of the pullbacks, so that kicked off.
Yeah, it all depends on who's doing the asking and what they're willing to pay and what else is going on the other side. I don't know how much you remember about the lead up to the stupid shit in Libya, but it was that same bullshit drumbeat out of certain European nations whinging and whining about certain things they wanted because they were in a spat over currency and resources with Gaddafi. And so they call on us to be their mafia enforcer. Look where that got us.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, I am of a mind that when Europe is like, you need to do something about this, we don't take the call.
Yeah, the proper response to you need to do something about this is, okay, here's the deal.
It wasn't the British.
You start this shit. And then we might come in and back you, but we aren't going to be the spearhead.
We'll have the Brits.
Want something done? Go ahead and do it.
Yeah, we'll have the Brits back because we have a different kind of defense pact with them.
Different relationship, yeah.
But entirely different relationship. But, this business about nobody wants to take care of what's going on in their backyard because they want us to come in, do the dirty work so that we can be blamed for any dirty work.
Which is what I was saying.
Yeah. No. You go in and break things and then we get to blame you for breaking things.
Yep. Because they will bitch and moan that we're the world police. Then we'll take a step back from being world police. And they'll bitch and moan that, well, where was America when this was going on?
Well, it's one of the reasons why I support our not being the world police. There are things that we need to do, which is play whack-a-mole with organizations like ISIS. But as far as some of the other stuff, no. Let it be handled regionally. Let other people take care of it. We've got bigger problems. We've got China building islands and things that we really need to keep our eye on in the Middle East.
I would say that I am not as hard set against the world police idea, but I think that it should be okay, you guys want shit done? This is how many troops you need to send in order to get shit done.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing. Part of the whole world police thing goes back to the soft persuasion conquest.
Mm-hmm.
Conquest through democratization of the world.
Yeah, I don't believe that we should be trying to
Christ on a crutch.
do that shit, but I'm more okay with the, you're trying to, no, fuck you, no.
Yeah, we're kind of picky about our genocides. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
We are.
absolutely admit to that. I think that we should be less
What a happy thought to end the
picky
stream
about
on.
that.
You know, we're not diverse enough. We should just go after everybody equally. Damn it.
Yeah.
Well, when I criticize the country, I try to do it honestly.
I know you do.
and being picky about genocides is one of the things I can say. Example here in here.
That's
Yeah,
why I
which-
kind of think I like zombie movies so much sometimes, because you know what? There's equality right there.
Which to me,
Okay.
the solution is always, okay, let's sort out that problem by being less picky, not just go, okay, we're just not.
Yeah, just kill them all and let God sort out the innocent.
Well, we spent 2 hours talking around it. We did get a little bit of discussion done. Good job, Sanguine.
Thank you. Yeah, I knew it was going to be a monstrous topic from the get-go. But
Yes.
I think that we hit the major points that we needed to hit. Why
Yeah.
they were a thing, why they aren't so much a thing now.
I'm sorry if I picked on you guys a lot. It's just you kind of are my biggest influence in terms of this kind of stuff. Like, that's just culturally a thing for me. I don't know. I can't speak for other Canadians, but yeah, that's
And-
usually kind of how it is. When wars start, we're kind of looking at you guys going, do you really need us?
And
No,
like,
we're going to do something else.
like I said, my entire premise behind why wars of conquest aren't a thing currently is because the current hegemon, the US, and the rest of the Anglosphere have been putting their thumb on that scale, going, yeah, we aren't going to allow this. There's a bunch of reasons for that, but I think that it does come down in large part, not exclusively, but in large part due to that wars of conquest aren't as common as they once were. They were always somewhat rare because, like I said, it required that power differential. But even in areas where that power differential and all the other factors that would encourage it are in play, it still doesn't happen currently. So, who wants to give their parting words first?
I
Shall
don't
we go?
have
Adam?
any, so that helps.
Oh, so Prospero doesn't have any, so let's go Jen then.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, and I enjoyed the conversation. I hope I didn't derail too much because I was interested in the ancient stuff too. It's just my ancient favoritism has to do with the kings and queens because I always find their stories really fascinating.
That'd be more medieval.
Yes, very much so, and very different because their conquests sometimes could be for really dumb reasons. I've learned. Some of them good, some of them dumb. Oh.
He said that I didn't have the balls to play a game and sent me a bunch of tennis balls. It's war.
Makes it fun,
who
though.
Get that
Makes it-
reference? Yes. SkepTock?
Well, I'm just to end it with my favorite quote. One of my favorite quotes about war from George Orwell. War against a foreign country only happens when the moneyed classes think they are going to profit from it.
Okay.
Wow.
Adam, are you around? You're currently muted, and I'm not sure if that meant that you stepped away for a moment If you
Nothing.
felt like you were about to zonk out.
Metaphorically, I think we can say he stepped away.
Okay. So I'll end off with my standard. If you're passionate about something, make sure that you devour it. Don't let it devour you. Oh, there's Adam. He just unmuted. Adam, you have parting words?
Yes. Good night. God bless. Love you all.
Well said. So, and with that, have a good night all. The zoo is closed.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.